Hey guys, today I'm going to walk you through the high-level overview of my entire investment portfolio and my investing process, which I've named the machine. I'm going to take you through each one of the 12 different asset classes that I'm invested in and give you a story as to why I'm invested in those different markets. Now, if you're new here, my name's Chris Dunn. I'm a full-time investor, which means I spend a lot of my time looking for new investment opportunities, managing my existing investments, and working with other startup founders and investors to help them build wealth. And I initially became known on YouTube because I was an early Bitcoin investor and I was one of the first guys in the world doing videos about Bitcoin back in 2013. Now, if you're wondering why I'm doing a video series all about my portfolio, let me just start by saying I'm not doing this to brag or show off or anything like that. In fact, it's taken me well over 15 years of very hard work to get to where I am today. And in fact, I went broke twice in my life. Once when I was 18, once when I was 21. And I actually even had a foreclosure in the early 2000s when the housing boom and bust happened in the US because I was over leveraged. And so really the goal behind this video series is to help you learn from a lot of the really expensive mistakes that I've made, as well as understanding how simple it can be to put together a clear investment strategy that can give you financial freedom. And also, I want to help you avoid a lot of the scams and the common mistakes that cost a lot of people a lot of money. So make sure to give this video a thumbs up if you want to see more videos in this series. And also make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos. And with that said, let's go ahead and dive right in. So before we dive into my investing process, let me just say I'm not a financial advisor and this is not financial advice. Make sure to talk to your advisor before you try to set any of this up for yourself. Okay, so what we're looking at here, this is my investing process, which I've called the machine. And the goal of this is to help me build wealth in the most efficient, optimized way possible for my lifestyle. And so what that means is we start with business cash flow. So my number one goal is to be able to take as much monthly cash flow as I can generate and throw it into my investing machine, right? It's kind of like the gas for the machine. If there's no gas coming in, it's going to be really hard to grow that exponentially. And my second goal with the machine is making sure that my time is optimized, meaning I'm investing my time in activities that give me the biggest return on the investment possible. So for an example, an inefficient use of my time would be trying to manage construction projects on real estate or day trading all day, every day, because I know I can get a much higher return on my time doing other things. Now, the fun part of the machine and what we're going to really be focused on today is the investing portion of this. And it's broken up into two sections: active investing and then passive investing. And active investing is any form of investing where you're putting your time, your energy, and your resources behind it. And passive investing is exactly what it sounds like. You invest capital, and for the most part, it's hands off. And I want to make sure that no matter what type of investing I'm doing, that it's structured in a way that gives me the biggest tax benefits. I don't want to pay a penny over what I'm legally required to, right? And there are a lot of tools that we as investors and entrepreneurs can use to make sure that we are getting the biggest tax benefits possible. So when you put all of this together and we start feeding the machine the gas of monthly cash flow, and we make sure that we're optimizing our time and spending it on the activities that are going to give us the biggest ROI, and then setting up an automated passive investing portion of this that's tax efficient, that's when it just becomes self-perpetuating and it grows quickly and gains momentum over time. Okay, now let's go ahead and dive into the details of the machine, and I'll show you all of the dozen or more asset classes. So you can see on the top here, we've got active investments, and on the bottom, we've got passive investments. And my goal is to spend as much time in my active investments as possible, because again, this is where the best return on my time comes from. And passive investments, for the most part, should be relatively hands-off. And from a capital allocation standpoint, just to give you some detail, my capital is about 70% in the active category and then about 30% in passive. And it changes as markets go up and down, but this is, as kind of a general rule of thumb, where the capital is allocated. And then in my passive investments, I've actually got a couple of different categories here. So I've got my retirement accounts or tax efficient accounts, which are at this point fully funded. And I'll talk about how I did that. Then I've got my long-term taxable stock market accounts. So these are cash accounts, right? They're not 401ks, they're not retirement accounts. It's just cash that I have in the stock market. And then I have what's called cash and cash equivalent, right? Basically either fiat currency cash or different assets that act as cash. So the first investment that I want to take a look at is the asset that's given me the best ROI over the past 10 years. And I wonder if you can guess what that is. If some of you crypto guys were saying Bitcoin, close, but the best performing asset for me is actually my business's enterprise value. Okay, so basically the value of the businesses that I've invested in, and any of you successful entrepreneurs out there know that the best dollar that you can invest is the one that you invest in yourself, right? Because generally when you're building a business, you can create much better returns on that cash than say passively investing it in the stock market or something like that. So again, the business enterprise value is basically the value of your business, right? And if you own a publicly traded company, it's very easy to understand what the value of that business is. If you own private companies like I do, it's much more subjective. But the second piece of that is the business cash, right? So business cash is obviously very valuable because you can take that cash, reinvest it in your business and continue to grow the value of your businesses. So we've got business value and then we've got business cash, which kind of go hand in hand. Now, the third investment is crypto trading and investing capital. Okay, now this is active trading and investing, and I have a few different capital buckets that I use for this. The first is what I call long-term position trading. So as crypto has really big market cycles, I trade to accumulate Bitcoin when prices are cheap, and when prices are expensive and there's a big boom pattern, I trade to accumulate more fiat dollars, right? The other capital bucket there is shorter term swing trading and the occasional day trade. Maybe take a handful of day trades every year, but for the most part, my sweet spot with this capital bucket is multi-week or multi-year trades. And then the fourth capital bucket here is angel investing, or private equity, or venture capital, right? So basically investing in other startup founders or funds. And I really enjoy this piece of the machine because this is where I get to work with and invest in other really smart entrepreneurs or other funds, right? So in a future video, I'll go through some examples of individual startup investments that I've made, either in funds, which go and take my capital invested in a bunch of places, or in individual companies where I have a personal relationship with the founder. And now the fifth capital bucket here is active stock market trading. Okay, so thankfully, my wife is actually a full-time stock market trader and investor, and her time frame is multi-month as well. She's a combination of both fundamental and technical investing and trading, and so thankfully I don't have to invest any of my time here, but she manages that piece of the portfolio. And then the final piece of the active investing puzzle is where my skills are the weakest. And that is real estate fix and flips or new developments. So again, you have to know your strengths and your weaknesses, and this is quite frankly where I suck. Anytime I try to actively manage a real estate project, it ends up losing money because I am terrible at managing contractors and subcontractors and just the whole process. There's so many variables that the return on time for me is not that great. So my rule of thumb is like, I have to partner with somebody who's really, really good at this. And so I put it in active because we're actively taking capital and working on something. It's not really passive. But again, just because you have an active investment doesn't mean you have to do everything, right? Partnering with people that are smarter than you in certain areas is such a great way to leverage your time. And so that's what I do in real estate, because the last fix and flip I tried to do, we lost $40,000 on, and that really sucked. And so I made a decision that from now on, I'm just going to partner with people that are way better than me at that. And that leads us to the passive section. Hopefully by now you understand you can have multiple places in the active category that you're putting your time and resources, but you kind of want to lean into where your core competencies are, right? Like, I'm a much better swing and position trader than I am a real estate developer. And if you know that and you know where to put your time, you're going to be able to feed that business cash machine, which is going to really be the gas for everything else. So as we move into the passive section, the first part that we'll talk about is the retirement section, or the tax efficient portion of this. And when it comes to retirement, let me just preface this by saying that means different things to different people, right? Some of you guys might be in the FIRE category, where you just want to retire early with as little amount of money as possible and live super frugally. Some of you are like lifelong entrepreneurs, where you want to work until you die. And then some of you might be on a more traditional path with a company, right? So when it comes to this portion of the machine, it doesn't matter what your goals are, as long as you're clear on what those goals are. So for me, my goal is, I'm pretty much a lifelong entrepreneur. I take sabbaticals from time to time, where I'll take a year off or not really take on new projects for months on end. And then there's other times where I go into hustle season, right? But for me, my biggest goal was, I just want to make sure that my retirement is taken care of and fully funded. That was a big goal for me, and we've achieved that. And let me show you how. So one thing that I did last year is I was able to set up what's called a qualified plan, or a pension. And I was able to take about $500,000 and put it in this account, and literally saved several $100,000 in cash that I would have had to pay this year just by fully funding that account. So if you're a business owner, being able to set up and fully fund your own pension and front load that is such a powerful tool. And then the second portion of this is kind of your traditional types of retirement accounts. So for entrepreneurs, it's called a solo 401k. And then I also have what's called self-directed IRAs. So I have a few different types of IRAs, but the biggest thing is self-directed is the key word there. So I've been able to invest in real estate. I've been able to invest in stock positions and private equity and stuff like that through these self-directed IRAs. So again, I just think a really good goal is to fully fund your retirement. That way you don't have to think about it, and you can build wealth in other areas. And again, I'll do a future video and do more of a deep dive on that. But let's move on. So in addition to kind of the tax efficient accounts, I also have long-term taxable stock market accounts. And this is really broken up into two major categories. The first is what we call kind of a boring, like 50-50 stock bond portfolio. So this is a really kind of long-term hands-off approach, right? So stock bond portfolio. And the goal here is like, I don't want to touch this or mess with it. This is not active investing. This is what a lot of people refer to as like a balanced, diversified portfolio, which is a great piece of the pie, right? Because a year like 2019, this has performed incredibly well and basically paid a salary for me without me even having to do anything. And I'll show you the details of that in a future video. The other major category here is what's called managed futures account. So back in the day, I used to trade my own futures accounts when the markets were way less competitive. And in today's markets, I just invest in funds that hire the smartest quants, mathematicians, PhDs, and I let them trade the futures markets for me. And I do that because I know my core competency and where I can get a much better ROI on my time is in the crypto, VC space, and building my own businesses, right? So it's been really nice to be able to outsource this to the guys that you read about in books, you know, the high frequency guys and the algos. And then that leads us to the last section, which is called cash and cash equivalents, right? And I think it's a good idea to have some cash, but if you have too much cash, that means that you are losing money to inflation. right? So when a lot of people think of billionaires, they just think of these really rich people sitting in their houses with $1 billion or more in cash. That's actually not the case, because if you have $1 billion in cash, that means you're losing about $30 million a year to inflation. And most billionaires actually hold their wealth in their business value or in other public markets, right? So my strategy for cash is I have it broken up really into 3 different places. So the first is what's called a high yield savings account for fiat currency. So like for like US dollars, right? And why I say a high yield savings account is because if you just keep a bunch of money in a checking account that isn't paying you any interest, you're losing a lot of money. Even if you don't feel it, inflation is eroding at that cash at probably 3 to 4% every year on average, right? So by putting your money in a high yield savings account, and what that means, it's not massive money, but right now, for example, you can make about 2%, which is going to help you at least stay somewhat even with inflation, okay? The second portion of cash that I consider cash is what I call my cold storage crypto. So like I mentioned in the, if I can spell here, like I mentioned in the active section of this, I have Bitcoin and other crypto that I use for active trading and investing, right? Either trading the multi-year swings or taking shorter term trades. But the cold storage crypto is really like if the shit hits the fan type of scenario, right? Where this is crypto that I don't really care what the price is. I look at this as a way to hedge against inflation because crypto has been increasing in value more than the dollar has been eroding. And that leads to the third option, which is similar to the way that I look at cold storage crypto, which is precious metals. So I also have gold, silver, platinum, and a few other types of precious metals that over time actually increase in value. Again, precious metals, meaning gold in particular, does not appreciate in value as much as, say, a stock portfolio would or real estate would. Really what you're looking to do here is just kind of hedge against inflation. At least that's what my goal is. And so I have gold that I keep that I know it's better to sit liquid in gold than it is to just have cash stuck under the mattress or something. So again, this is a high level overview of my machine, right? And just to recap, kind of the biggest goals are to hyperdrive cash flow, right? That is the best way to really build momentum with investing, is not think about like, how can I squeeze an extra few percentage points out of my investments? It's how can I dump as much free cash flow as gas into the machine, right? Then the second thing is to make sure that whatever your active investments are, wherever you're putting your time, make sure that's where your core competencies are. And that's where your best ROI and your highest and best use of your time is going, right? And then with the passive stuff, you know, my best advice there is just make sure that you are tax advantaged as much as possible, that you're taking advantage of every deduction or every type of structure that you can. And then just a couple of kind of wrap up questions here. Number one, where is the best time invested for you that would create the biggest amount of monthly cash flow for your investing machine? Really spend time thinking about that, right? If you have a regular job, like how can you get a raise? If you're an entrepreneur or solopreneur, what can you do to reduce expenses and increase cash flow, right? Increase sales, increase revenue in whatever business you're in. And then number two, what asset class or investing goal can you work on today, right? Like I mentioned, it took me a long time to get to this point, right? This didn't happen overnight. And I've made a lot of really expensive mistakes along the way. And hopefully with this video series, as we go deeper into each one of these asset classes, and I show you some of these accounts and different investments, hopefully you'll really understand the right way to do this, or at least the way that I've done it, and be able to save a lot of heartache and, you know, hard knock lessons. So again, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you want to see more videos like this, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe. And in the future videos, we'll be going into much more detail. And feel free to leave me a comment if you have any questions. and I will see you in the next video. Take care, guys.